The symbol of the crab and the crayfish is featured in many different cultures and mythologies, and this is because this symbol is connected to the divinity within mankind and the movement of the ether upon our terrestrial plane. Ether is the fifth element and works as a medium for the Christ light or Holy Spirit, and thus, upon its return to our physical plane, the degree of divinity within each human soul is revealed. This movement of the ether ebbs and flows like the tide and corresponds with the ages of the great year. When the element of ether is at its peak or at full tide on our physical plane, we are in the golden age, a time when the divine amongst us are known. And when it is at its lowest, we are in the iron age or the dark age, where no difference between divine man or mortal man can be identified. The Hindu holy texts state, "We will know we are in the Iron Age when society reaches a stage where property confers rank, where wealth becomes the only source of virtue, passion the sole bond between man and wife, falsehood the source of success in life, sex the only means of enjoyment, and when outer trappings are confused with inner religion, then we are in the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age." The Vishnu Purana. Another symbol connected to the ether is the ocean. As mentioned previously, the tides of the ocean resemble the flow of the ether, and just as the crab is a creature of his environment, the ocean, divine man can be likened to the crab because he too is a creature of his ethereal environment. This is actually where the saying, "to be in your element," comes from, because the divine man is most at home in his element, which is the ether. However, the connection of the crab and crayfish to the ocean doesn't end there, because the exoskeletons of these creatures actually contains magnesium calcite, which is a mineral found in the ocean too. So just as their environment is part of them, so is the ether and light part of the soul of divine man. If we look to the astrological symbol of the crab, we see it is ruled by the moon. So again we can find a connection to the tidal movement of the ocean with this celestial orb which rules the tides. And so it is of no surprise that we can find the symbol of the crayfish on the moon tarot card. The symbol of Cancer also corresponds to the numbers 6 and 9. 6 relates to the physical, and 9 relates to the attainment of wisdom which occurs when the ether returns to mankind and removes the veil of ignorance from their eyes. The numbers also symbolically represent the endless cycle that the divine race and mortal man exists within, and their continuous movement from a state of physicality to one that is more ethereal. The Hermetic law of rhythm also relates to this cycle that mankind exists in. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kabbalion. We see this cycle relayed in Plato's story of the Atlanteans, who are symbolic for the divine race. As they move down through the ages and the tide of ether recedes, they forget themselves and move further from their divine nature and God. For many generations, as long as the divine nature lasted in them, they were obedient to the laws and well affectioned towards the God whose seed they were, for they possessed true and in every way great spirits. However, the Atlanteans became corrupt. When the divine portion began to fade away and became diluted too often and too much with the mortal admixture, and the human nature got the upper hand, they then, being unable to bear their fortune, behaved unseemly, and to him who had an eye to see, grew visibly debased. We see this symbolism of the crab and the ether repeated in the story of the crab and the crucifix. The story goes as follows. One day, Saint Francis Xavier was travelling at sea when suddenly a very strong storm hit the ocean. Saint Francis Xavier, fearing that the boat would sink, threw his cross out into the ocean. As soon as the cross sunk down into the angry sea, the storm settled and the ocean became peaceful and calm, and the boat then continued on its journey to shore. Once on shore, a crab scuttled towards Saint Francis Xavier, and in his claw was his cross, and on the crab's back a cross was marked into its shell. The angry sea is symbolizing the chaotic time that mankind experiences in the lower ages, when evil has taken control of our world and we are spiritually lost without an understanding for our divine nature. The ocean calming after the cross is thrown into it, and the crab returning with the cross, represents the ether returning the divine man to his rightful place, bringing peace and goodness back to the world. This is also why divine men are known as the peacemakers, as related in Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. We also see the symbolism of the crab and divine man in the Japanese legend of the Hikigani crabs and divine Heike samurai clans, who were defeated by the mortals in the lower ages when the samurai lost access to their divine nature and abilities, and the mortals had overpopulated and defeated them. However, rather than allow themselves to be taken prisoners by the mortals, the samurai escaped in ships and then threw themselves overboard and drowned. The samurai were reincarnated into Hikigani crabs when some of the crabs ate their remains. Then, to show their allegiance to the divine warriors, all the Hikigani crabs displayed the fierce mask of the samurai on their backs, and it is said that they still roam the depths of the oceans around Japan to this very day, waiting for the return of the lost heirs of their kingdom. Then we have the Guarani people of South America and their mythology about the prime creator they call Tupá, who created the first two humans, Rupavi and Saipavi, who then had three sons. The first son was said to be the wisest of prophets. The second son was the most generous. However, the third son, Jepazar, was said to be greedy and a liar and always doing things backwards to confuse people. He committed suicide by drowning himself and was then resurrected as a crab. Again, this is symbolizing divine man's descent down the ages into the Iron Age, when he forgets himself and falls into his vices, only to be resurrected when the ether returns and his divinity is revealed. Another connection we see with the crab symbolism and the metamorphosis of the divine man and woman being returned as the rightful heirs to their kingdom is the symbol of the crab and the butterfly, often with the Latin phrase matura, meaning ripe. This is describing when the time is upon us and the ether returns, divine man is transformed into his true form, and he is once again in his element, and his divine qualities are visible for all to see. This verse from Isaiah 49:8 relates this transformation of the divine among mankind in the following way. God also says, "When the time's ripe, I answer you. When victory's due, I help you. I form you and use you to reconnect the people with me, to put the land in order." Another Latin phrase that also accompanies the symbol of the crab and butterfly is festina lente, which translates to make haste slowly. The meaning behind this phrase has perplexed many academics who find this a complete contradiction, but as many students of Hermetics understand, everything in creation is a paradox, and what this phrase is alluding to is that if mortal man is to transform into the Christ-like being intended, then he must take the time to appreciate the intricacies of his environment, his spiritual nature, and his place in creation. He must not waste time on meaningless follies. Epictetus explained it in this way: most of what passes for legitimate entertainment is inferior or foolish, and only caters to or exploits people's weaknesses. Avoid being one of the mob who indulges in such pastimes. Your life is too short and you have important things to do. Be discriminating about what images and ideas you permit into your mind. If you yourself don't choose what thoughts and images you expose yourself to, someone else will, and their motives may not be the highest. It is the easiest thing in the world to slide imperceptibly into vulgarity, but there's no need for that to happen if you determine not to waste your time and attention on mindless pap. Although not all human souls are divine, every human soul has a degree of divinity within them and can absolutely transform into the Christ-like being that their Creator intended them to be. This teaching from the Corpus Hermeticum explains this further. The intellect, O Tat, is drawn from the very substance of God. In men this intellect is God, and so some men are gods, and their humanity is near to the divine. When man is not guided by intellect, he falls below himself into an animal state. All men are subject to destiny, but those in possession of the Logos, which commands the intellect from within, are not under it in the same manner as others. God's two gifts to man of intellect and the Logos have the same value as immortality. If man makes right use of these, he differs in no way from the immortals. The language of symbolism is not a subject that can be taught in one video. What I have attempted to do in this video is give students an insight into the meanings behind the symbols of the crab and the crayfish, and how they are connected to the divine nature within mankind and the cycle that we exist within. However, for those who wish to have a deeper understanding into these symbols, I would advise you use this video as a stepping stone on your journey of self-discovery and keep seeking.